There are some very important updates regarding the SEC actions against Do Kwon and TFL and how that could affect Terra Luna Classic. This is going to be a doozy, so buckle up and let's get into it. Just the other day, we had an ex-SEC lawyer who actually joined into a Twitter space to offer her insights on how this whole situation could play out. And she brings up a really good point. Anybody who profits off the supposed fraud from Do Kwon and TFL, potentially they essentially might have to give back the ill-gotten gains. And she might be wondering, okay, what does that actually mean for us as Terra Luna Classic investors? Well, we can look to one other situation where there was another major fraud situation. That would be the Bernie Madoff scheme. Now, the Bernie Madoff situation was essentially a large-scale Ponzi scheme where people were forced to pay back billions of dollars of ill-gotten gains, and this is where we have to start a conversation of how this could affect Terra Luna Classic investors. Now, in this Bernie Madoff situation, what happened from the Ponzi is that net losers were the people who ended up losing money from the Ponzi, and net winners were those who actually profited. Now, what happened was the net winners were subject to so-called clawbacks. This is essentially where they're required to give back the money that they actually profited. And so not only did they lose money that they thought they had in their accounts, they had to pay back profits that they had withdrawn over the years. And so these individuals essentially got hurt twice, first by Madoff and then the trustee who essentially said, give me your profits. There's one situation I want to highlight here. There was an individual who ended up giving Bernie Madoff roughly $3 million to invest for them, and they ended up taking out 25 years of rewards equaling 10% annually, which meant that he took out more than he initially put in. Now, they ended up wanting his profits, and this risked putting him in the bucket of individuals and institutions that the trustees were suing, claiming that they should have known the returns were fraudulent. This is important for us to highlight because the SEC, in their claims against Do Kwon and TFL, said that TFL and Do Kwon committed securities fraud, and that this whole thing was essentially an elaborate scheme. And I think the biggest threat of this potentially playing out with ill-gotten gains being recovered by the SEC would be the Oracle pool. Now, the Oracle pool ended up essentially being filled during the collapse when people are losing dramatic amounts of money. That's how the Oracle pool received its funding. And so it seems like there might be precedent here for the SEC to come after the Oracle pool and the Oracle pool distributions that have been given out, saying that this money actually belongs to the people who lost money in the collapse. It does not necessarily belong to the stakers, because this money essentially became available to us from this supposed fraud situation. Now, this, of course, needs to actually go through litigation, and we need to go through the process here, but I think this is a risk that we need to be aware of. And look, I get it. People are going to be upset of me saying we might lose out on the Oracle pool. And if you guys actually appreciate me showing you the precedent that's been set in this Bernie Madoff case and this level of honesty that you're just not going to find anywhere else, I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't mind consider subscribing down below. They did name initially both Do Kwon and TFL, but they also specifically named the Luna token and UST as issues. And so it's probably worth us considering potentially getting some separation from TFL and trying to separate ourselves and distance ourselves in the future. That's really all we can do. All we can do is look towards the future and prepare. We can prepare and look at what happened before, what might come at us from that, and then how can we avoid any further issues in the future. And this is where we might need to consider the separation from TFL. And I put out this poll the other day, and we have just about 100 votes right now. And it seems like it's relatively close, but there is a little bit more favor going towards trying to separate from TFL and distance ourselves from this potential fraud issue. And look, this precedent from the SEC, it sucks. It's not fun. It's not going to be good. But we have to be honest with ourselves as to how this complaint and charges against TFL and Do Kwon could play out here. And we have to be prepared for the potential risk that the SEC does go after clawbacks, in a sense, of telling people if you profited from the downfall from this fraud that they're claiming right now, then you need to actually return funds. That way we can reimburse those people who were harmed from the downfall. And so hopefully it doesn't play out like the Bernie Madoff situation where we have to return funds and go through that whole mess of a scenario. But it's important for us to be aware of that scenario because while it's not very common, a lot of cases they'll actually go after the company, the people in charge of the company like Do Kwon in this instance, but they'll leave the investors alone. They'll say the investors had nothing to do with this. They're totally separated from this. It's not their problem. But in the scenario, in the Bernie Madoff scenario, there is precedent of them going after the investors to return any profits. Now, if you didn't profit, you're probably fine. You don't really have to worry about this, but it's important for people who are accessing things like the Oracle pool through staking to be aware of this risk. If you guys got value out of this video, please consider checking out this video up here, and I'll catch you all in the next one.